Well, this is just a wonderful opportunity to engage with Avi's wonderful work. And I so appreciate his rendition of the group. It felt very real and very recognizable in that there's so many layers and so many things going on at once. And so anything I have to say about it is just one slice. And I was enjoying Tamara's comments and making notes as well. And I'm sure all of us would have just very meaningful things to say. I don't have an organized paper so much as thoughts that hopefully will string together. So as they come along. First of all, from the get-go, one is so struck by how caring Avi is. He starts by talking about how he scrupulously asked for the group's permission to present the session and got their input about it. And one gets the feeling immediately of a very respectful, protective, parental figure, professional figure. He gives each of the members the right. If anyone didn't want it, that would be it. So it's very empowering. Avi uses interesting words to describe the group analyst's role. He said the role of the group analyst is to establish the group's quality and capability. And indeed, at least that's in the English translation. I hope it works. These are just great words because in fact, he really describes a group which has really great quality in terms of value, right? One feels that there is something of real quality, of real value that takes place, as well as many qualities in terms of capacities and elements, hence the layered sense of things. In orienting us to how Avi thinks about group, he touches base with Stephen Miטשל and the bringing together the horizontal and the vertical, and bringing together both Sullivan's idea that the distinctly human exists in the field of interpersonal relations, and Daniel Stern's emphasis on pre-verbal intrapersonal existence. And so we find in group this shared unconscious and both the horizontal and the vertical axis, where we have the internal as well as familial, sibling, societal dimensions, which is part of the wonderful richness of doing group work. I would also add that it really feels like it's a living version of Winnicott's paradox. I mean, group is about living in paradox, and Winnicott's paradoxical understanding of the human subject as always both inside an isolate, private, uncommunicable internal experience, and always embedded in intersubjectivity. There's no infant, there's only a mother and an infant. So it's the paradoxical human condition, and it's wonderful. It's one of these things where every group session sort of captures a whole world. So we get to the session, and the group is very tight-knit, right? They've worked intensely and have shared secrets and personal issues that they've not shared with anyone else, which really speaks to that's quite a place, quite a space in these people's lives. And that must reflect the quality of the group as a safe and transformative space where what is unspeakable can become speakable and what is shameful can be integrated. The idea that these are things they haven't spoken about with anyone else. That sounds to me like something about shame. The warmth and support and sincerity of the group is evident when they give a warm welcome to Orna. And I do like what Tamar was saying just about how the group finds itself with a new member and an old member having left as a stranger to itself. And I thought that sounded really right. When you do groups, and one person leaves, even if no one else comes in, but then there is a new group, the group that meets next without the member who left. And and all the more so when there's a new member. And I was thinking that, you know, the beloved group member has left a month ago, and then we have Orna coming in. The group is presented with the task of accepting and engaging with a new member, with separation. And to me, that begins the theme of the passage of time, which involves in it the issue of loss and melancholy, right? Something has gone, something, and how does the group deal with the passage of time and separation? Orna introduces herself in a fascinating theme. She spends her days looking for her home. She's literally looking for a new home, and she herself regards that search as emblematic of a search for a partner, a relationship. And I myself was thinking of Wynnicott and the idea that the original home, where we start from, is the home of our mother's mind, where we are held and known and find ourselves. Being held in mind in an ongoing way instantiates going on being that is central to the sense of the self as continuous and is central to the sense of time. So there's some interesting connection between finding place in mind, and the passage of time and the going on being of the group. So I was picking up an unconscious theme of this continuity and going on being. Lital speaks. She's so interesting, a lecturer and dance instructor. She's been striking out on her own with her own business, and she has to also face a separation and leaving the safety of employment. She too wants to find a partner, and she's too dealing with separation and moving on. She talks about the tremendous vulnerability of online dating, and some weeks ago she had described in the group, we're told, a terrible date where a man had been forceful physically with her. The group had really helped her recover and re-engage, and that must have been very intense work, because somehow she and the group had enough strength to say, come on, you've got to keep trying. And she's continuing. So in this session, she describes herself as having Asperger's, right? Though clearly an intelligent and bright person, she finds that her mind is not working well in the area of dating. And she describes another situation where a man ignores and erases her and is forceful, even sadistic and verbally violent with her. It seems terrible to me, the man's attack on her, as when she didn't want to be physical. And it's so interesting that earlier we talked about self states, right? That Asperger's, she's in an altered state in this whole area. We would seem to be in the powerful territory here of enactment and repetition of trauma that will not leave her and will not allow her to be free. We also, along the way, I'm thinking, and what is the group's Asperger's? What is the area where the group cannot think and finds itself damaged in a way? And I was thinking later, and I'll come back to it right at the end, where Avi connects to some sense of dejection and the issue of depression in the group. But we'll come back to that. But the theme of home continues in Lital's story. This time it is the man's home, right? They went on a date. The very next day, he invites her to his home. And there's this whole thing about a quiet evening that struck me. And I felt, I think like Avi too, protective of Lital. What are you doing? It is sinister. His home is a sinister place. He invites her into his home the day after they met. She goes, and events are painful and invasive. She certainly seems to be someone acting as if they have Alzheimer's. She's in an altered state of trauma and repetition. I mean, we see this, right? Smart, intelligent, very aware people can act as if they are blind. She's in the world where something is not yet able to be put into the past. Hence, there's a repetition. I had a very strong feeling of repetition. Something cannot be put in the past and therefore keeps happening. She tells the group that she is a people pleaser and infers that she accepted the invitation for the date in her people-pleasing mode, which is the self-state of being the people-pleaser, abandoning her common sense and any connection to herself and whatever she might have desired or not, and any sense of self-protection. She knows that once again, and she's humiliated herself. And there seems to be the people-pleasing seems to me to be, it's very common, we find that it's a commitment to what we might call, what Sheldon Bach calls objective self-consciousness, which is finding yourself outside of yourself in the minds of others and in the desire of others. And she's really struggling in that self-state with subjective self-consciousness, which is finding herself an inner orientation, paying attention to her own self. All of us have both those dimensions and we integrate them. But she's people pleased. She's only involved with other people's desire. And then she says, as you know, my father had his way with me when I was 8, and I actually barely even know what it means to have a father or a man. And it's really interesting. This is a woman who has suffered an incestuous relationship with her father. And that's, to me, that felt massive, life-defining and group-defining, I think. This is incest. We learn nothing about this but it's inferred when she said, as you know, to the group. So we understand they must have, this group, which does work, must have done a lot with this. But I can still feel the shadow of it. And I think that I myself had a little Asperger's moment, because as I was just now listening to Avi, I had the sensation that he had not mentioned. I suddenly couldn't remember. I wondered if he had edited out the piece about the father and the relationship with her. I couldn't remember him saying it. So even now, I'm involved in something about this. I can feel the power of how much we can go into an Asperger's state. But we also know that she says she barely even knows what it means to have a father or a man, which I take it to be a statement that as a result of the incest, she has suffered damage to her ability to think and to know about men and about herself in this area, hence the Asperger's experience. I think she's talking about a whole area of her mind that has been shut down and is frozen in the past. She's locked in these repetitions, constantly repeating aspects of trauma. And I do want to wonder how that's played out in the group. And I did want to mention, I thought of a paper I read recently. Those of you who were on the IARPP online colloquium, the most recent one, the relational colloquium, you would have read Dana Amir's paper, The Malignant Ambiguity of Incestuous Language, which dealt with incest, where language appears to be revealing but is actually concealing as one of the results of incest. The mixed message of the incest, I am your protector, I am violating you. This is to help you, not to harm you. This is love, not hate, and so forth. It attacks the ability to make links and to translate unconscious implicit messages. The result is a tremendous vulnerability in human relations, especially, as we know, in the area of love, intimacy, and romance, and a kind of emotional blindness. I thought of Lital's Asperger's experience of herself and her mind. The result is the abnegation of the self, becoming a people pleaser, and a fear of ambiguity. The people pleaser role also takes care of ambiguity. You never have to, right? The decisions are made for you because you're following the other's instructions or the other's desire. If I submit to an objective self-consciousness, I can erase my subjective self-consciousness, my sense of my own interiority. It is a version of what Dana Amir talks about in that paper, it's a terrific paper, a flattening of three-dimensionality, which creates a kind of concrete thinking. Hence her concreteness when the guy asks her to his place, she simply takes it literally. It will be a nice warm Hanukkah evening with candles, right? And like I said, when I was reading it, I felt terror, you know. She misses the obvious because she is in the zone of literality. People like Lital are often confusing themselves, manifesting the malignant ambiguity in the way that they live. So the incest is present in everything. So she is so smart. She has great capacities. I'm sure she's a great dance movement person. And she's so undone and lost in the area of relationships. She makes no sense, right? The group unconsciously takes up the issue of ambiguity warmly, but firmly giving her some clarity. Noah says, look, the guy's talking about sex. Come on, what are you thinking? And they all pick up the issue of time in a way. I felt that there's recognition that she's out of time, she's frozen. They talk about her innocence, which is infants. Innocence is a myth of infancy, right? And infancy is without speech, which they know and she knows is a vestige of childhood. Miri seems to give voice to one of the adaptations, turning vulnerability into adventures. She does say that after she had a period where she was with men a bit indiscriminately, she would do it with a bravado and then she would feel panic afterwards. Avi reflects with warmth and resonance that dating men is a jungle of dangers. The only thing I would have thought to focus on here is Lital's painful confusion in this area. Yes, I wondered if I would have wanted to focus on Lital's painful confusion. It is so hard to tell what is a violation and what is seduction. It's a complex question as to whether it is for the group leader to make the connection to incest, right? I want to just leave that question open, and I don't know the answer, but it was in my mind. Would that move the group closer to each other and the terrifying experience that is in the room? Or would it remove them from the connectedness and the implicit way that they are helping Lital think and regulate herself and integrate? Because they're doing that already in a meaningful way, I think. Miri then gives voice to one aspect. Yes, she's had her adventures, and she says, but it's impossible to get into that world without getting hurt. I feel the support and empathy for Lital, but also the evasion of her own confusion and frozenness. And I think Avi is onto this because he tells us that he's aware of how the group members who help, like Miri, are avoiding their own pain and confusion, which certainly seems to be the case with Miri. You get the feeling. As Miri predicts, Avi was about to direct the group, as most of us would, I would have, he was about to direct them, but what are you feeling? How are you experiencing this moment? It's worth noting that in this discussion where parental incest and damage are silently present, Avi's presence is crucial. He personifies the father of clarity, of care, as opposed to the father of malignant ambiguity and violation. He reassures...
Robert, so yep. We have about 3 minutes.
All right, I will do this.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just made notes. I didn't realize I'd written so much. I'm sorry. I wanted to say, you see, yeah, I wanted to take up Orna. I think is it Orna's promise to herself right? That she says that she won't move in. First of all, Orna wants to move to a place by the sea, right? And she feels it's beautiful, but she can't be there because of the noisy neighbors. I felt like that was also the group, that the group is a beautiful place, but there's the noisy neighbors upstairs, right? The noisy neighbors of trauma won't let you settle in. And I felt that right. I will only move into my own permanent home with a partner. I still haven't found one yet. I am still wandering. And I feel like if there is a way that all of this about home is about, can we be in our own minds? Can we deal with the noisy neighbors in our own minds and so forth? I felt that she was saying, I will not be able to reside in my own self, in my own mind, until the abusive, violating introjects have been dealt with, because Orna herself doesn't have an incestuous relationship with her father, but she has another erasing and violating, sounds like a nasty father, takes her car, doesn't care, until it can be in the past, right? Until I can deal with the noise and these terrible persecutory internal objects, I won't be able to reside within myself. And because both Orna and Lital have these internal introjects and they blame themselves. Lital blames herself in a persecutory way for going to the guy's house on Hanukkah instead of what the group helps her do, which is think it through in a kinder self-protective way. You got the feeling that her blaming herself wasn't helping her at all. It was only adding insult to injury. It was just compounding this, you've been violated, it's your fault, as opposed to, can we open up thought? Right at the end, so interesting, Avi says, the here and now cannot suffice. And I think that is just so interesting, because I think we need to unpack the idea of here and now. We don't have time right now, but I think that the issue of the unpassed, that Scarfoni is drawing our attention to when we talk about dissociated self-states, we're talking about not simply a past and a present, but there are very different kinds of presence, right? There are, and that, so the here and now does not suffice. I'll just leave you with the quote, and then I think I'll finish on time. This is from the Scarfone, which is so interesting. And he's talking about repetition. What returns is only seemingly in the present, since if it were present, it would soon become the past and therefore cease returning. Yet via returns, it repeats itself precisely because it has failed to become part of the past. It is a very specific kind of present, not an eternal present, but an atemporal present, a time that does not pass, the unpassed. And that's speaking about where someone continues to find themselves back in the suffering of Lital and Orna is not yet in the past. Anyway, I'm sorry, I had to rush.
Thank you very much, Robert. We will take just 5 minutes for questions. שאלות, מי שרוצה פה מהקהל מוזמן, ובזום אם מישהו רוצה לכתוב שאלה, אז גם מוזמן או לדבר.
מקסים. חשבתי על מתרגמים אותי? חשבתי שאנחנו מחברים את האנליזה הקבוצתית והגישה ההתייחסותית, ואני רוצה להזכיר משהו שגרוסמרק כתב, לא זוכרת באיזה מאמר, שאנחנו מסתכלים בקבוצה לא רק על מה שאנחנו אומרים אחד לשני, אלא על מה שאנחנו עושים אחד לשני. זאת אומרת, לא פחות, ואני חושבת שתמר בעצם חיברת היום, כי בעצם הצלחת ממש מרגע לרגע להסביר מה המשתתפים עושים האחד לשני, מרגע לרגע. מה הפעולה, אני כמי שבא מהתיאטרון, מה הפעולה הדרמטית שלהם, מה הם רוצים באמצעות הפעולה לגרום לאחר לעשות עבורם. וזה היה נורא יפה, כי זה בדיוק מה שמחבר בינה את האנליזה הקבוצתית והגישה ההתייחסותית, לחפש לא רק את התוכן, אלא כל הזמן מה אנחנו עושים אחד לשני, ואני חושבת שיש פה את הגשר הזה בהתייחסויות היום.
רק להגיד דבר אחד, שאונה שאומרת שהיא לא תמצא בית עד שיהיה לה בן זוג, אני חושבת שזה מה שהיא עשתה, כאשר היא בעצם חזרה אליך לטיפול אישי, והחליטה שזה יהיה הבית שלה, עם בן זוג, ולא הקבוצה כרגע.
טוב, תודה רבה לכולם, אנחנו יוצאים להפסקת צהריים. Thank you, Dr. Grosmark, and we will meet in half an hour.